It's always great when you connect with old friends back in your birth country, Denmark, and one of the leaders in Denmark that shows the way for how you actually can build businesses that does positive impact through their culture. And Carl Johan has been on a great journey we told about before, but he's done some amazing things, especially when it comes to food and hospitality, and he's been part of some really well-known businesses. He won an award for his leadership abilities. So thank you so much for saying yes to come on the show, Carl Johan, and talk about how actually culture can be that unique competitive edge that can drive your business forward.
Thank you so much, and thank you very much for having me as well.
Carl Johan, just from a context point of view, besides that you're from Denmark and so on, but talk a bit about your own journey and actually how that led you to co-found the Table Group.
Well, I started out, I don't know how far back we should go, but actually I started out studying political science, university. I thought when I was 18, 19, 20 years old that I should try and make positive impact in the world through politics, basically. And then I started at university and found out that I was actually more into doing all kinds of businesses. I founded a catering company when I was 19 years old, and I don't know if you remember, but back then we had these mobile phones that could go on the internet through the WAP technology. Yeah. So I was one of the pioneers back then, founding a WAP company. We actually succeeded in making a little bit of money on that. But yeah, so I studied political science, but was actually probably more into running businesses. So I changed to Copenhagen Business School and got a job as a car salesman at the same time. Yes. I like cars a lot, and for me, a car is more or less of a sort of cultural experience. So it was a fantastic job to have selling cars. And then one day, actually an interesting story because it was quite defining. A guy comes in, and he looks a bit scruffy. And he wanted to he said that he wanted to buy the most expensive car in the dealership. And cars in Denmark are very expensive. So the car in question was a Cadillac SRX. And it cost around, in today's money, it would be around 250,000 British pounds. So quite an expensive car, especially in Danish terms. And he was a bit arrogant. So he said, "I want to look at that car," and he walked away. And then I had sort of 5 seconds debate with myself: should I go with him or should I just leave him to a colleague? And then I thought, I'm gonna try selling him a car, and I sold him a car. And he actually turned out to be a very nice guy who was just basically trying to test me out a bit. And so later on, he bought a couple of other cars for me and ended up offering me a job. So I came with him to his software scale-up. At the time, I had quite a bit of interest in software, so it made sense to work in a software as a service scale-up. So when I finished at Copenhagen Business School, I got a job as a sales director in a software scale-up. Worked there for a couple of years, and then found out that I missed. I mean, software in itself was interesting, but I sort of missed the. I missed to. I wanted to feel more passionate about the product that I was promoting. So that was sort of where I was at that point in time, and then got a job in another car company, Better Place. That was one of the pioneers in electrifying mobility, basically. And while I was waiting to start there, I saw an advert in Berlingske, a Danish newspaper. It was so long ago that you saw job adverts in the newspaper. And it was a Danish food company, Meyers, was looking for a managing director for one of their small branches.
Yeah, that's a company that comes out of the famous chef Claus Meyer.
Exactly. Yeah. The founder of Noma, and quite an icon in Denmark. So I was really keen on getting the job, and did all I could to make myself pretty at that moment, and interesting. Then I think actually, looking back, I was a bit lucky. I was definitely lucky, but I think that it was a small branch, and they were not that keen on paying large money for the person they hired. And so I think many of the other candidates basically thought that it was not interesting enough money-wise, and I was willing to take the bet, so to speak, and so I did, and I was lucky to get the job. And then I started there in 2010, so 14 years ago, and had the job for 10 years, working with catering and events to begin with, and then it evolved into being catering and events and restaurants and bakeries and delis and consulting and teaching and all sorts of things evolving around food and good food and passionate people. So we started out with a revenue of 14 million Danish kroner a year, and we had around 250 million kroner in my department when I left 10 years after. Then in 5 or 6 years after I started, we got Claus sold the majority of the company to a private equity, IK investment, and they then for the next 5 years, I mean, lots of things changed in the company, some for the better, some for the worse. And then after 10 years, I felt that it was time to move on. So I quit in 2020, actually just around some of the COVID lockdowns. And I quit without having another job, but I had some ideas about what I wanted to do, but also felt a need for a little bit of a break. And then I came up with the idea of making a catering company, lunch catering company, because I have always found it interesting to invert, to see things from another perspective, basically. I guess that was one of the things from political science that I took with me, actually, and it has helped me a lot over the years. And normally in the food industry, or at least in Copenhagen at that time, sort of fine dining was all the rage, and Noma was the best restaurant in the world, and so on. So all the attention was going in that direction. At least that was what I felt. And I, together with some other great partners, thought about I mean, if you have a large lunch catering company, you are actually catering for quite a lot of people every day, and you serve, I mean, intense amounts of food, tons and tons of food. So the actual impact you can make if you do that right is a lot larger than the impact you make if you have a fine dining restaurant.
Yeah,
because you cater to a lot more people, and you dive into an industry that chefs don't find very sexy. And I found that intellectually as an interesting challenge to actually make lunch catering a bit more sexy, maybe.
It's super interesting, that thing, actually, where, it's great there's restaurants trying to change things, but actually the impact they can do on a daily basis, the story is great, but they are not serving thousands of people. And thereby and also the access for people is maybe very small. You need to be able to afford a very high price point when you go into a Noma or a Pricity in London or whatever you go. It really communicates and reflect the whole ethos around sustainability and doing the right thing. But it's so expensive that very few people are ever going to get in contact with it.
Exactly. And I had also experienced in Copenhagen, at least, that lots of people talk about sustainability and impact and so on, but actually getting their hands dirty might be a bit more challenging. And it's easy to criticize the food systems or whatever, but it's another thing to try to actually make impact through the actual things that you do. So we set out to build a catering company, hiring or collaborating with, again, trying to invert. So normally in a catering company, you have one head chef that develops the menus, leads the kitchen, and so on. And that over time, that often comes out to the problem that the guests demand more variation. So we try to turn the model upside down and have a collaboration now with 35 international top chefs from Michelin star restaurants all over the world that help us develop the menus so that we have, a very high level of variation. And we also we have given them a lot of limitations. Now I'm very much I'm going down. I'm taking a detour here about the catering company.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Carl Johan.
But the point is that with these chefs, we have also given them a lot of limitations. For instance, they only got like around €3 a day to cook for. Food has to have a very high level of organic produce. It has to be a buffet, which is not a plus word in Michelin star with a Michelin star chef. It has to be transported all 1.5 hours through Copenhagen in a thermal box, and so on. Lots of limitations. And we found out actually that the more limitations we gave them, the more interesting concepts and ideas came up. Yeah. And so we use that to actually promote a more sustainable lunch. We have decided or set a goal that 50% of our guests should eat vegetarian, all vegetarian, or have a full green menu every day. The industry average is, I guess, around 10-12%. So
okay,
yeah. And the actual impact we make there is like, currently we serve 2,500 covers a day, and if you calculate the CO2 impact, at least that we make there it's around 500,000 kilo CO2 per year that we actually save the atmosphere from. by serving so much green food as compared to the industry standard.
Yeah, and what would that be compared to is there any comparables you've done through like use of a car, travel with plane?
It is. I mean, a regular car emits around 4,000 kilos of CO2 per year. So, equals 125 normal cars yearly driving.
That's amazing. So I guess also you went down that route because you wanted to do things and you saw there was a different way to do things, your counterintuitive approach you talk about. But what about you? You have some other business areas as well, because it's a complex business, and that's what I always found fascinating observing you for that journey, where you came from a very clear kind of model to now actually you've been building this almost, TARDIS of different business revenue streams and trying to get them to work. It's like an orchestra, you said before we started out.
Yeah. Because when we were, it takes some time to build a catering company. So while we were at that, and I quit my job, and then I had a few months to reflect, and then during that time, a near and dear colleague of mine quit as well. Then we started talking about, if we should do something together. And while we were building that idea, one of the founders of a Danish meal kit company called Årstiderne called me and said that they were looking. They had bought a place in Copenhagen and were restoring it. 4,000 square meters of fantastic old wooden barns in the middle of Copenhagen, surrounded by lots of trees and sort of in a small little forest. And they had bought this place and were looking for a CEO. And he had heard about me somehow, and it was interesting because I think actually what he was looking for was a sort of, now I'm wearing a blue shirt today, but he was looking for sort of the archetype of a CEO, structured person and sort of a bit formal and so on. And I said that, been there, done that. I'm in the middle of building my own food company. But you could, why don't you consider hiring my company to run your place? And his first reaction, he's sort of the typical chairman, very nice guy, Thomas Hartung. His first reaction was sort of, well, no, thank you, but no thank you. And then a couple of weeks after, I guess some of the other candidates they had on the list all said no thank you. Again, so we got lucky, I guess, and he came back, and then we quite quickly actually signed a deal. So we took over the operations of BaneGaarden, it's called, and it is an event location and a place in Copenhagen where we run street food stalls. We do lots of corporate events, workshops, conferences. We actually also do a bit of strategic development together with our guests and customers. So we act as sometimes as a sounding board for strategic, what's the word in English? Strategiprocesser.
Strategy processes, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. And we have built a greenhouse where we do education for school children in the Copenhagen municipality. We have 1,400 school children through our courses every year. We do bingos and yoga classes and teaching and talks and lots of activities and all of it's in a green, sustainable, and sustainably restored part of Copenhagen that should actually, I guess, would not have been there if Thomas and his partner Søren Eilersen, who is also the founder of Årstiderne, if they had not had the, huge courage and optimism to take over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, because that normally places that's just gonna be lapidated, and then property developers would build new stuff on there in principle. So that's
exactly. And the buildings are protected, but the thing is that they were in such a bad shape that probably if they had waited a year or two more, they would have had to tear them down, and then it would have been obvious to just develop the area to whatever housing project or office buildings or whatever. Yeah.
So it's interesting how you came out with a very clear idea about the catering business, and then it evolves into this multi-stream kind of orchestra business with multiple revenue streams and all these different activities, which demands very different skill sets, and it's a very complex business, as we talked about before. But what is it that what is the vision for this? What is the mission you're on with the whole company now? What do you have like a clear idea about where you see this in 10, 20 years' time?
Yes. I think for our company, having been in a somewhat larger company before, I have always found it interesting to see if you could build companies that they might be complex in their construction because of the different revenue streams and so on, as you describe it, but in the way they act, I've always found it interesting to try to build companies that do not act as if they are complex. So I guess if you normally you could have if you have a coordination
system.
Yeah, where you have agility on one axis and you have size on the other.
Yeah.
Normally, it tends to the dynamics tend to be so that the larger you are, the less agile you get.
Yeah.
And one of our missions is to see how large can we be without the curve actually going downwards. I found that quite interesting and intellectually stimulating, basically, to always think in that way. How can we do this? How can we grow without getting complicated and annoying to either work with or work in?
Yeah. And how did that then reflect in the day-to-day of the business? Because I guess you're still quite a young business, you would say, when you're 4 years in. But how does that, in an operating point of view, it feels like there's a lot of decision power that has to be then out in the front line, not central.
Yes, if you imagine the company as a person or a body. I think one of the key elements for us, at least, is to have a strong body and a quite small head, basically. And I've seen and experienced myself that often as you grow, you tend to get a very large head, and sort of starving out the body. So that was one of the things that we decided early on, that we wanted to invert that and create as much decision power as possible, as, if you could say so, as low down in the hierarchy as possible. We're also saying that we don't have a headquarter. We're actually around 100 and almost up to 150 people now in the organization in total. We don't have a headquarter. We don't have an HR department. We don't have an IT department. We don't have all those kinds of things. We don't have a finance department. So And up until now, it has actually been working quite well, because many of those different needs that you have in a company that grows and has reached a certain sort of size, you can easily have that on a part-time basis or freelance basis or outsource basis or whatever, working with fantastic, great, cool people that don't need a fixed desk and a computer and a pension scheme and so on.
And what was the decision around that, Carl Johan? Was that for agility that you didn't put that in? Because often what I see, you get bigger, as you say, you starve out the body. I think that's a really great way of saying it. Because actually you just want people to automate in principle things. So you put in the HR department, you hire the finance team to optimize and efficient the finance and the cash flow. You get in the marketing team. All these things, all decisions going to be taken by very few people in an organization. That's typical how you do it. What has been the thinking around that from day one? Is that for agility? Is it a cost thing? What is like the philosophy around avoiding having these support functions?
I think one of it is agility. I think, and I've experienced that the larger your headquarter gets, the more meetings you get. There are some mathematics there that are also quite interesting. I mean, if you gather 5 people in a room, you have, I don't know, 1,000 different combinations of how those people can actually set up a meeting, for instance.
Yeah.
Sort of basic thing that you would really try to avoid at all costs, in my opinion. So one part is agility. Another thing is that it's, at least in the business that we're in, the actual value that we are creating is very close to the guests. So, for instance, how do you create the best customer service in the world in a lunch catering business? Well, one answer could be to hire 5 fantastic customer service people.
Yeah.
Another answer could be to say, make it not necessary to actually contact customer service. Make sure that you don't make any mistakes. Make sure that your food arrives on time and in the right amount, and that the customer gets what they are actually ordering, and so on. So instead of creating more complexity, how can you create a system where if you do it right, then you don't add complexity? And another thing is that in terms of cost, the cost that the support functions or headquarter functions, the cost that they create in the organization has to be sort of gained by the guy on the floor, if you could say so.
Yeah.
And I strongly believe that it is actually, I mean, a chef in our kitchen is creating quite a lot more value to the guest than some marketing person or customer service person might do.
Yeah.
So we are trying to spend our money as close to the guest as possible, if that picture makes sense.
It totally sense, yeah.
Yeah. And up until now, at least, I mean, we cater to we have a revenue of around 75 million kroner this year, 10 billion euros. We're serving 500,000 plus meals a year. We have, I mean, thousands and thousands of guests. We run 500 events a year at BaneGaarden, and at least up until now, it has worked great without having a headquarter. Of course, we have a person handling sales and bookings, and we have a person handling marketing and so on, but we don't have 5 or 8 of them.
You don't have teams of the different parts. So if you would say, like, just for the audience, so if you have the classic traditional Christmas tree organization with lots of departments, all the power sits in the top, and then you have a self-managed organization where, it's all clusters. It's like the Lars Collin talked a lot about the spaghetti organization. Where do you see yourself on that scale? In a way, it seems like there's a lot of decision power and leadership that is out by the individual chefs and the people in the front line compared to a more traditional model.
Yes, I think so too. And I guess we're more in a Lars Collin kind of organization than the traditional Christmas tree. We also try to make models for our managers where they get a quite real sense of co-ownership. So, for instance, we have started running canteens. We've signed we've signed a contract with NREP, one of the largest real estate developers in Northern Europe. And normally, when you run a canteen, you hire 5, 6, 7 people in the kitchen, and then in Denmark, the business model is largely based on bonuses and kickbacks and so on. So the independence for the actual head chef in the kitchen is not that high. And we have tried to invert that. And the head of the canteen is her. In this case, her salary is to a large extent based on the happiness of the customers and the profitability of the operation. So the more guests that eat in the canteen, the more she gets paid, basically. The more events she does, the more activity she creates, the more the cafe what's the word? The better the cafe works. Basically, the more the more money she makes. Just to
and sum it up. And so they principle, are they co-owners, or they like a partnership model where they get a bigger share of the business?
They are currently they get a bigger share of the business, and in time, over time, as we grow, hopefully we will be able to create a system where they can also actually be co-owners. However, I also believe that you should think carefully about, what you can do with stocks and stock options and so on. You can also do with real money. And I have tried in my own career to have lots of different stock schemes and so on, and it has not always been to my sort of advantage. So currently we try to create that effect with money, and really paying people for the success they create.
Yeah, so performance-based in principle, performance and an outcome based, instead of like something down the line that nobody's really in control of in the world.
Yeah.
What do you have like a clear strategy then, Carl Johan, for how you want to build? It seems like you're trying to build an organization that is definitely with more over the self-managed way, but it's like it sounds like you're on a journey. But do you have like a plan for how you would like to see that evolve, or are you evolving as you go? Like a merchant strategy.
Yeah, we do lots of things differently. When we say that we try to invert as much as possible, it's inspired by Charlie Munger, who got inspired by a mathematician I forgot the name of, but he says, Munger says that all I need to know is where I am going to die, so that I will never go there. That's an example of inverting, turning things upside down, or looking at a problem from another perspective.
Yeah.
And the idea about having the growing organization that will not get more complicated is also because the actual thing that we want to do with our businesses is to use them and use our profitability to create impact. I shared the story with the catering company before. BaneGaarden is also set out to be an example of sustainable city development. It would have made sense to tear everything down and build some concrete temple where BaneGaarden is actually placed, but we decided to keep everything as it was built in 1909 with wooden barns, and have restored them very carefully. We have got all food is 100% organic. We don't have any single use. We serve the street food on porcelain and so on. Lots of dogmas and principles to show and hopefully push the world and the community in a more sustainable direction. And I think that the people you can attract that want to work with sustainability, they would also be more interested in working in a company where they actually have decision-making power, even though that they are not, might not have a CEO title or whatever. So at least from our perspective, those things are very closely linked together.
And it seems like you came yourself from a more traditional model. I just guess. I don't know Maya from the inside out, but I could just guess it was more traditional, like my own background. But then you're now doing this thing. Is it easier to do what you do now? Do you feel as a CEO, do you feel that's easier to lead than it is to lead the Christmas tree?
Yes, but I guess where I came from at Myers, we had a large private equity as a owner and lots of different departments. When we got sold, we had 27 VAT numbers, so basically 27 companies in the company. So there was also a lot of things that created complexity, while probably not intentional. Then it just happened to be like that.
Yeah.
And because of that, of course, it's my life today is easier than it was because I have fewer stakeholders and we can quite fast change direction or change things that don't work or implement new ideas and so on, because everybody is on the same page and work closely together.
Do you think also that it seems like you have a very clear philosophy about how you want to do things? People know they have the power to make decisions. Do you think that becomes a competitive edge when you meet new customers that is interesting, engaging with you? Do you think that's one of the things they look at, or is that just the outcome of how you operate that people like?
I think a bit of both. And hopefully it's the outcome that they find us easy to work with. And I guess many of them also find it inspiring. We do lots of corporate events at BaneGaarden, for instance, and we often do a tour and we talk about how we do things. And I invite them to meeting room 1, which is outside in the woods. And I could just see in their eyes, all of them, all the corporate people coming there in blue shirts that, oh my God, I wish this was my meeting room 1. And we chose that meeting room as meeting room 1 because you can't show PowerPoints and you have to keep meetings very brief and so on. And you can see that in the eyes of people that wish they worked there as well, or in a company that thought in that way. However, we also see more traditional customers in the lunch catering, for instance, where they expect us to have lots of departments and could you please hook me up with HR, or could you please, and who is your finance manager, and blah, 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 all those kind of things. And I have to tell them that you're looking at him. And some of them, I guess, is interesting. We had, there was a large tender that we got invited to bid for, a large canteen contract with a Danish pension company. And they said that they really wanted something new. They wanted something original. How could we sort of reinvent the canteen experience and so on? And we were very honored to be invited into that process. And before we came to the actual tender, they came back to us and said, "Oh, it was so inspiring what you came with," and we chose to ask Compass Group and ISS and the traditional, very large other competitors in that market. So they said they wanted change and impact, create impact and so on through food, but in reality, they probably felt more safe with a more traditional way of doing things.
But I think also there's the human thing, isn't it? Like when you are used to because I can remember myself transition from very corporate McDonald's into a very entrepreneurial environment in my past. And then, of course, I took some of my old colleagues with me because I thought they're going to help me because we've been through lots together and they wanted a change as well. And they couldn't operate in that entrepreneurial environment. That was like a big learning for me that some people are really scared from. They think they want the new and then they stand in front of it and have to deal with it. For example, there was no systems. When we McDonald's, there's systems for everything. So you're just pushing the system forward. And then suddenly you're in a situation in a company where there's not that. And same goes when you're selling to people. Oh, I would like something new, but just slightly newer, not the extreme, I guess. And I think that's very human in a way. But I think also it says something that you actually have to dare. If we want to see the change in the world and we want to make it a better place, we need to dare a lot.
Exactly. And as you say, it is really human, and we all tend to. I mean, if you see something going wrong at a hospital, we all think, oh, we need to have some more control at the hospital.
Yeah.
How could that happen, and so on. And the same goes for business. And you really need, in my view, to fight that instinct, because, for instance, more control in our system, it would just kill entrepreneurship, ideas. It would take away responsibility from the actual person cooking the food or meeting the guest or whatever. And it's a thing that we like to fight a little bit against, if you could say so, because you get the impression that with all these fine departments or with all these control systems or whatever, we're safe, but I mean, in my perspective, you need to start with the actual person and make him do his job as good as possible. And then, of course, you also need to have control systems here and there. But it's another way of thinking, at least. And I have seen great disasters happening in companies with huge control systems.
And also lots of very talented people, almost losing I've seen that myself, losing their confidence and you lose them. The good people go away because they feel trapped or stressed out because they can't use their super skills or their abilities, what they are best at. I was thinking as you're saying that, so like if you operate in this way, Carl Johan, is that easier to attract good people? How you felt that as you scaled the organization from yourself, your partner, and growing the business up to 150 people? Has that been, it's never easy to find the right people. I know that it's a hard skill in itself, but in the market we're in right now in food, hospitality, it's very hard to find people.
Yes. And I really would not like to come across as being a bragging type of person, but it seems like that to us at least at least to some extent it has been easier and easier the larger we or the more we have grown and the more we have become known. So in the beginning, it was quite difficult to attract people, and it was difficult to find the right ones and so on. And it's at least these last maybe 12, 18 months, it has. I mean, it's always a challenge, of course, to find the right people, but we haven't had that many problems in that area, at least not compared to what I see and hear in many other also good and nice companies, well-working companies. So yeah. So hopefully, yeah, it seems like that there is some sort of competitive advantage there, you could say. And we've also, it's also important.
No, go ahead, Carl Johan.
Yeah, okay. It's also important to stress that we have also had the huge advantage of being able to create everything from scratch.
Yeah,
I know from personal experience how extremely difficult it can be to change something that is already working and running and so on, and you very rarely tend to do things in a completely different manner when you are up and running. So that's also a thought for future reference. That I mean, you should really know that the things you set in motion can be more and more difficult to change over the course of time.
Yeah, and I think also that's when you start from scratch. You have like this whole blank canvas about how you can do it, and you actually can live out your philosophy as the owner and CEO and founder of things. I was also thinking, is this really good business then? Because you're definitely growing in revenue, but everything in business is about the bottom line. Is that? Can you see that's developing very positively as well with this very different way of structuring yourself? Because I guess you are saving a lot of headcounts.
Yeah. It is a very profitable business, and it also gives us the advantage that we can invest the money in the actual product, in the food. So hopefully over time it will. I mean, it is like that now, but hopefully it will also be that in the future. That the actual quality we are serving at the price we are charging is extremely competitive, because we can focus on the actual food we're delivering, which is the main thing. You can have all sorts of fantastic digital systems and fantastic customer service and whatnot, but if the actual food does not arrive on time and tastes great, then I mean that it won't sort of the traditional tools will not work if the food is not fantastic and the quality is not great. So.
And that's really what it's about in the end. The customer thinks that the food is outstanding, no matter what.
Or that the event is professionally executed or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, so I guess we got an EBITDA profit margin of around 15% on average, where the event and venue business might be a slightly lower. We also have a quite high rent there, but it's still a nice and profitable business, and the catering business might be slightly higher. So
that's a very healthy bottom line in the food world, and everybody listening to it will know this. What would be your top advice to other leaders that's getting inspired by this, because thinking, okay, I want to transition an existing business to become more agile, maybe not going all the way, But there's also people that are starting from scratch or very early on the journey that can do something too. What is like your top advice to do when you set out on this journey?
I think it would be to steal some ideas from people that inspire you. I myself I am quite inspired also by Warren Buffett. And I went to the Berkshire Hathaway annual general meeting here in May, 4th of May in Omaha, Nebraska, for the first time. And I mean, here is the one of the wealthiest men in the world, and he's 93, still running a huge company. I mean, I think they got maybe 300,000-400,000 employees, something like that in total.
Yeah.
And in the headquarters, I think there are something like 14 or 15 people. So he's really sort of an example on that. And then he was asked in the end, a young guy asked, what would be your ethical testament to us, your shareholders? 30,000 people attend this general meeting. Is really quite an event. And he thought a bit, Warren Buffett, and then he said, I would actually say that it is to be kind. And I mean, be kind. It's so simple. Charlie Munger, he says also that his way of thinking was that to take very simple ideas and make them great. And so I guess if I should say one thing that, and it has only occurred to me over the last maybe 5, 6, 7 years, that maybe if you have the sort of guiding or leading principle to be kind, then there is a high probability, at least I think, that you will build a company that's not too complicated and complex and not too infected by politics. You will treat your customers well. You will treat your people well. It will be nice. You will be nice to be around, basically. And normally we tend to, I think at least that was how I was raised as well, we tend to think of business as sort of a competition. You got to win and you got to defeat the competition, and you have to be strong. And as a leader, you have to be strong and persistent and blah, 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 all that kind of thing. And at least, and probably in the end, the best thing you could do might actually be to be kind.
It comes again. I was writing something the other day. I write every morning, Carl Johan, just to reflect on my own learnings. And I was like thinking about this because I'm building a business as well, where I think, are you competition driven or story driven? And actually, very funny, we have a very good investor that says, how are you scaling the story? So I'm always talking about not how much sales are we doing, how are we making sure the story scales, and then we might sell into very traditional customers somewhere, but in a way, they also want that story. That's what they buy, and they don't buy our product and the competition of that, and of course, price and all that. Quality, all that is important, but it's really about how do you actually scale stories in a way, and how do you actually do that in a kind way. I love the way you very simplify that thing. If you're kind, just put that as a step one. You can ask yourself all the way, is this actually a kind benefit and compensation system? Is this actually a kind way of delivering the product? Is this a kind way to hire people? Blah, blah, blah. I love that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What
are you thinking, Carl?
Yeah, I think it's actually a very basic human thing that we all could learn from and work more with. Because I read this book, Chris Voss, who was an FBI hostage negotiator.
Yeah.
He's I mean, when you hear him speak and so on, you almost get afraid of him because he's a very powerful person in just his way of being. Have you got the book on the shelf?
The thing is called Do Not Split the Difference.
Never
Never split the difference. I don't have it here right now. We'll put it in the show notes. But
yeah. And I mean, he talks a lot about empathy.
Yeah.
So if you want to win a negotiation, which a hostage situation actually is, you would have to show a lot of empathy towards the hostage taker. Yeah. And your instinct would be to not show any empathy and just to try to bully him or persuade him with power or whatever. But if you want to reach a good result, you have to show empathy.
Yeah.
I guess that's,
Let's come back to the kind again. It's connecting with the kind again. To be kind, you really have to be empathy. And also you will meet people on the journey that's difficult and so on, but don't spend your time fighting with them. Actually, just let them be and try to be as kind as possible. Then you might even turn them around, and I think that comes from the Buddha as well. Where can people connect with you if you inspired somebody and they think, I want to hear more about this because I think I can learn this? Any way people can connect with you in some way? What's the best way to do that?
Well, that would be, I guess, on LinkedIn or to come to BaneGaarden and ask for me. We just hired a very, very basic, simple office here. I don't know if you can see it in the picture, but it doesn't cost much. But this is our headquarters, and otherwise we're at BaneGaarden 5-6 days a week. So I'm always happy to connect with people and share thoughts and ideas and get new inspiration myself as well. So,
Great. Thank you so much, Carl Johan, for joining us and sharing the story and your learnings about how building an organization that makes positive impact on people, community, and planet, and also a very successful business.
Thank you too. Thank you so much for having me. It was great talking to you.